I see we have a young man in the audience. Would you stand up, young man, yours back there? Would you come forward? We pick on young people here. What brings you to the council meeting tonight?
For a merit badge.
I thought so much. We make all of the Boy Scouts lead us in the pledge, so that if you will come forward, and I would have everyone stand, if you would lead us in the pledge. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Now, if you'd come to the microphone and introduce yourself and tell us what troop you're from.
I'm Bruce Dwayne from Troop 1963.
And you're here to get a merit badge. Was welcome tonight. Don't feel picked upon. We do the same to all Boy Scouts who come here tonight. I figured that's why you were here. Welcome to the Roswell City Council meeting. We're going to have a short meeting, but we will have an interesting work session following this meeting if you'd like to stick around. You may have a seat. With that, do we have a motion to approve the consent agenda? Motion by Councilmember DiPolito to approve the consent agenda. Do we have a second? Second by Councilman Orleans. Does anyone in the audience have any questions or comments about the consent agenda? All in favor of the motion, raise their hands. Passes unanimously. This time I'll call upon Councilmember Betty Price, Liaison to the Community Development Department.
I'd like to call Brad Townsend, Planning and Zoning Director, to present the item RZ0915.
Thank you, Councilman. This is an application to remove a condition from a previous county rezoning that restricts a property to one driveway. This is RZ0915, located at 1385 and 1398 Old Riverside Road. This is approximately 0.85 acres, located right on the Chattahoochee River. It is currently zoned Fulton County Annexed. This is the subject property in red. As you can see, the yellow line is dividing the two existing homes. What is being proposed is to have the home on the right allowed for a second driveway, which was controlled under a previous condition by Fulton County. This was reviewed by the Planning Commission. They recommended two conditions, that with a site plan as well as the requirement for a division plat. This property has been reviewed by the Atlanta Regional Commission in reference to the Chattahoochee River corridor requirements, because they're within 2,000 feet of that corridor, dealing with pervious and impervious requirements. Those are the two recommended conditions by staff as well as the Planning Commission. In summary, staff would recommend approval of RZ0915.
Council have any questions? Mrs. Price, do you need more information before you make a motion?
I just wanted to make sure that those staff conditions still applied.
Yes.
Further information you need before you make a motion?
No, I move approval of RZ0915.
Do we have a second? Second by Councilmember Dinah. Does anyone in the audience have any questions or comments?
Can you please turn on your microphone?
Does anyone in the audience have any questions or comments? Does the applicant wish to add anything? You're doing pretty well so far. Any further discussion by council before we vote on that motion? All in favor of the motion, raise their hands. Passes, well, Mr. DiPolito, passes unanimously. Good job, applicant.
Now Mr. Townsend will present RZ0916, Orchard Village, Rucker Road.
This is a proposed application to amend a condition of a prior rezoning established under RZ0310 as well as RZ0428. It is in reference to the request for the Alpine Bakery to include a dining area as part of its current bakery and pizzeria. These were the prior conditions on the RZ0310 as well as the RZ0428, which controlled the uses of the property. What is being proposed to be recommended is condition number 2 on RZ0428 to be amended to allow restaurants without drive-throughs. This is the existing subject property. It contains the Alpine Bakery. What is being proposed? We have the existing Alpine Bakery and the pizzeria, as well as a hair salon and cleaners, and Edward Jones and a dentist currently in the shopping center. And there is a vacant 1,500 square foot bay in the shopping center. This is the proposed layout, which would move the Edward Jones location, include bathrooms on the back of that proposal, and have a new restaurant area for the existing Alpine Bakery. Staff has received comments from the surrounding HOAs in favor of this proposed location for the expansion of the Alpine Bakery for a current restaurant. In summary, staff would recommend approval of amending condition number 2 of RZ0428 to allow for the restaurant for the expansion for the Alpine Bakery. If you have any further questions.
Council have any questions? Council have any questions? No questions? Yes, Councilmember DiPolito.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Townsend, the sit-down restaurant allows for the entire building potentially to be restaurants. We're not restricting this to a particular square footage?
No, we have not as this particular condition, but that would be appropriate if council so chose.
What is the requirement for parking for restaurants? In a strip center, I believe, there's no special consideration for restaurants, is that correct?
I think if it's determined on shopping center, there's a different category. Restaurants are normally required a minimum of 1 parking space for every 125 square feet. If it is considered as part of a shopping center, the shopping center overall criteria is 1 parking space for every 275 square feet minimum.
But is there adequate parking for this particular space to become a restaurant?
Yes.
Thank you.
DiPolito raised a good question. Is there adequate parking if we allowed other places to add restaurants?
Probably with the current square footage, staff would have to analyze that. I mean, with this current request, there is sufficient parking.
If we pass this without any restrictions, would they still have to meet the requirements to add another restaurant? Would they still have to review the parking, or would they automatically be allowed to put all restaurants in?
Every business license would have to be reviewed to make sure it met compliance with the parking requirement. So when that restaurant would be proposed, we'd have to review it to ensure sufficient parking.
So that would ensure that we wouldn't exceed the parking requirements if we permitted another restaurant.
Correct.
Thank you. Other questions? Does the applicant wish to add anything to this? Is the applicant here? Yes, sir. Come forward, please. Give us your name and address, please.
My name is Don Goodman. My address is 2990 Windrose Drive, Marietta, Georgia, 30062.
And what is your connection to this business?
I am the president of Equitable Management Corporation, which is the managing agent for M Park LLC, which is the owner.
The landlord. You're the landlord.
Yes, sir.
Is the owner here tonight?
No, sir.
Thank you. Anything you'd like to add to what staff has said?
No, sir.
Does the council have any questions for the landlord? Thank you, sir. If the question comes up, we'll call you back up.
Thank you.
Does anyone in the audience have any position, either any comments or any for or against this project? Mrs. Wynn, it's Mrs. Price, it's up to you to make a motion.
I move to approve RZ09 with the recommended staff conditions and the recommended planning commission conditions.
Motion for approval with recommended conditions by Councilmember Price. Is there a second? Second by Councilmember DiPolito. Any further discussion by council? All in favor of the motion, raise their hands. Passes unanimously.
The next item is RZ0917. Again, Mr. Townsend will present this.
This is a proposed text amendment related to the nonconforming section of the sign code dealing with removes dismountable material that was allowed as to be substituted. Also deals with wording to allow for structural changes, not to allow for structural changes dealing with technology for nonconforming signs. This is the first reading of this application. The Planning Commission reviewed this item, and it has been redrafted to their request. Staff included the draft ordinances in the backup material as well as Planning Commission minutes. Staff recommends approval of the proposed text amendment. Do you have any further questions?
Does the council have any questions? Mr. Davidson, what was the occasion to amend this ordinance?
This arose out of litigation. Some shortcomings in our sign ordinance were presented in that litigation, and this will address those issues that arose.
Would you read the ordinance, please?
Thank you. This is an ordinance to amend Article 22, signs of the zoning ordinance of the City of Roswell. Now therefore be it ordained, and is hereby ordained by the Mayor and Council of the City of Roswell, Georgia, pursuant to their authority as follows. Article 22, signs, Section 22.7, nonconforming signs of the zoning ordinance of the City of Roswell, Georgia, is hereby amended by deleting Section A in its entirety and substituting therefore a new subsection A to read as follows, the text of which is incorporated herein by reference. In Article 22, signs, Section 22.7, nonconforming signs, is further amended by deleting subsection B in its entirety and substituting therefore a new subsection B to read as follows, text again of which is incorporated herein by reference. And if approved, this will be the first reading of the ordinance.
Do we have a motion to approve the first reading of the ordinance?
So moved.
Motion by Councilmember Price for approval. Is there a second? Second by Councilmember DiPolito. Does anyone in the audience have any questions or comments? Any further discussion by council? Councilmember Price.
I just want to have assurance from Mr. Davidson that Susan Bauer's comments in the Planning Commission were addressed and that there were no other sections that needed to have changes to be congruent with this.
Yes, ma'am. She was addressing subsection C in the same section, which has to do with signs that are damaged. And what that section basically says is that they can restore the sign. They cannot make any changes to it. I think she's addressing the second sentence in there, which is basically the same language that was in subsection B that we're changing. But in subsection C, that language doesn't even need to be in there, really. It's wordy, to say the least, but it's in there, and it's not a problem that it's in there. All it allows is for restoration of a sign. It doesn't allow for any changing of the sign.
Would there be any appropriate wording in the second reading that would reduce redundancy?
It's not really redundant. It's just more of a, I think when it was rewritten, that it was kind of stressing that there won't be any structural repairs or change in the shape or size if the sign is damaged. It's not really pertinent, but it goes to stressing that they won't allow any changes to the sign. You can just restore the sign.
Will this make it clearer if it's up to a judge's interpretation? Will this make the council's intent clearer, this extra language?
Well, the extra language we're talking about is not addressed in this ordinance. The two subsections that the ordinance addresses are A and B. Ms. Bauer's comments go to subsection C, which are not even addressed in this ordinance. And the language is fine as it is, or we could take out the second sentence if council wants, but there's no need to.
Ms. Price, do you have any other questions?
Well, I just want to make sure we haven't not addressed the problem or compounded the problem. If this takes care of it, then I'm very happy to stop talking.
Takes care of it.
Thank you.
Does anyone in the audience have any questions or comments about the first reading of this ordinance? Any further discussion by council? All in favor of the motion, raise their hands. Passes unanimously.
The next item is the initiation of a text amendment to Article 22.3 of the City Code and Section 10.23 of the Roswell Zoning Ordinance, presented by Brad Townsend, Planning and Zoning Director.
Yes, thank you. This is a proposed initiation of a text amendment. The Community Development Transportation Committee reviewed a issue dealing with commercial vehicles being parked in residential areas. It was requested at that committee that a text amendment be initiated to control the use of commercial vehicles being parked on property. Staff has provided some starting language to discuss that would be included in Section 22.3.4 of the City Code, as well as part of Section 10.23.4 of the Home Occupation section. This controls that any commercial vehicle in excess of 10,001 pounds would have to be completely screened from abutting property in street view or located within an enclosed building, except when actually engaged in loading and unloading. That's similar language we utilized in trying to control the parking of recreational vehicles on individual residential lots. So this is recommended for initiation by the Community Development Transportation Committee, if the council so chooses.
Just a suggestion. I know that they may be doing something other than loading or unloading. I understand the purpose is they need to be in operation, but for example, you might have a boom truck taking down a tree.
Right.
And just to keep this clean, I think we need to expand it to today while engaged in some sort of operations, because it may not just be loading or unloading materials. It may be doing something else. It may be a fire truck putting out a fire. I'm just trying to get
some activity that the truck is used for.
There's some activity which is it's an operational involved, and it's not just sitting there parked. So I think if y'all would look at expanding that language to look at, it's there. It's not just parked there. It's actually in operation.
Okay. We can do that.
Does the council have other questions or suggestions? Councilman Orland.
I'll say along that same line, many times you have a moving van that may be overnight because of them loading it and so forth or unloading it. So I don't know if that probably fits into the wording here, but just to be aware of some of those different situations, more of a generalized term of doing what they're supposed to be doing.
Lawfully, they're doing what they're supposed to be doing.
Other comments? Councilmember Price, do we have a motion?
I have a comment, please. I know that part of the reason for putting or initiating this was to address an issue of vehicles in yards that were being used for business purposes under the home occupation. And I wonder if there's some other sentences in 1023.4 that might either be deleted or altered and taken into consideration with this, since they seemed more to inflame the public when they weren't enforced because they weren't being enforced. Mm-hmm. Also, the final sentence prior to the addition is the transporting of goods by truck is prohibited, that almost sounds like it's more onerous on somebody who has a business in their home than the average resident who sees the UPS truck a couple of times a week.
Right.
I wonder if that also is putting a larger burden on somebody with a home occupation. So those are the two sentences I would like to have us consider and look at to see if we might just delete those.
Okay.
The previous sentence, being the one, only vehicles used primarily as passenger vehicles, since there didn't seem to be a good definition of that, and
Okay.
there were work vehicles that were being self-categorized as a passenger vehicle because it had a bench seat, when in fact it was really more like a business
Commercial.
usage.
Okay.
And, when the average person sees that in the ordinance and wonders why we don't enforce it, we should probably either enforce it or remove it.
Okay. We can look at those two sentences.
Again, this is a motion to initiate, so this will go before Planning Commission before it comes back to us.
That's correct.
Councilmember DiPolito.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just, picking up on what Councilwoman Price said, that last sentence about transporting by truck, is truck a defined term in our ordinance, or do we need to change that to commercial vehicle?
I don't think it's defined.
That might be one thing to look at while you're
Right.
cleaning that up. Thank you.
Okay.
Any further discussion? Do we have a motion?
I move that we initiate a text amendment to chapter code section 22.3.4 and zoning ordinance section chapter 10 section 10.23.4 and any other needed changes to that.
Motion by Councilmember Price. Do we have a second? Second by Councilmember DiPolito. Does anyone in the audience have any questions or comments? Any further discussion by council? All in favor of the motion, raise their hands. Passes unanimously. At this time, we're adjourned. We have a meeting in room in 220 to discuss Groveway Charette report, the 2010 economic update, and discussion and mayor and council goals. And for the record, Councilmember Eigelhart and Councilmember Wynn are absent with an excuse. Room 220 is across the rotunda.